so after running every test and scan, the doctor calls the guy back in and he says, well, the good news is there's nothing wrong with your head or your stomach or your back. The bad news is your finger's broken. And because your finger's broken, whatever you touch, it hurts. And I love that joke, and it came to me as he was speaking because our lives do hurt. We're earth, we are suffering. We are bringing suffering to the world around us. We are transmitting suffering. Because of course, like the t-shirt that Gaur Gopal Dasji was speaking about, already disturbed, if I've got disturbance in me, if I'm manufacturing disturbance, well, you can be pretty sure that that's what I'm going to share with you. And yet, like the guy in the joke, the problem being the bones in his finger. In our lives, we're not connected. And so the lives hurt. We're moving through the world with that broken connection. And so if we really get connected, not an inoculation against your house burning down or getting fired or losing a loved one or the stock market crashing, but it is an inoculation against thinking you are crashing, losing yourself in that which is happening outside. And circling back to the question when Chris had begun with, how do we hold on to this? That here we are in this magical, extraordinary land on the banks of Ganga, an energetic vortex of awakening and enlightenment and union and oneness, and we're coming together in so many different expressions of that all day long. But how do we hold that? Well, the best and only way to hold something that I know of is to make sure it's actually yours. The reason that it's so hard to hold these sorts of experiences is because they are just relegated to my outside world. Oh, here I am on the banks of a beautiful flowing river. Naturally, peace change you if during these days you really open yourself up to these teachings. It'll go home with you. Think about if you go on a trip or a summer holiday and you have a fling, a romantic fling. Doesn't mean anything, but it was fun and you were on a holiday, and so you get on the plane to come back home and it's over. You're going to go back to your real life. But if when you went away, you actually fell in love, it doesn't go away when you get on the plane home. In fact, all you can think of on the plane home is that oneness with the being you love and how you're going to reorchestrate your life so that you can actually be together with that beloved. And so while you're here, it's important to make sure that that experience you have isn't that actually within you that transformation happens. Then don't worry, it's going back with you because it is who you are. And lastly, because it's us, when you're back in the marketplace, in the office, on the subway, in the noise of the world, remember that the source of noiselessness is not a quiet country house with earplugs. The source of noiselessness is within yourself. And so wherever you are, if you can just reconnect to that moment, to that breath, to that truth of who you are there. It's not about sitting on a subway, because spirituality is about that moment, that place, that breath, and in that moment, there you are on a subway in New York. And how can that place, that moment, that breath, be the place? So this week is the laying the lines for you, connecting you, but then you'll take it back with you. If it's really yours, it'll go home with you, because it is you.
Thank you, Sadhvi.
So Sadhvi, you once shared with me to allow myself to be impacted so deeply that what reminded me of that, and how we bring yoga off the mat is to be so impacted on the mat, or whatever the experience is that resembles the mat. Maybe it's this week for all of you, that we can't help but bring that deep devotion to stay in present awareness with us into the world. And so to come here and spend a whole week being impacted, I think, is a phenomenal part of this process. Of just like, who does that? Who actually takes a week? We often go to 3-day seminars, but to come all the way to the banks of the Ganga, and immerse yourself into a week of training, I think, is a fundamental foundation to be impacted deeply enough to be able to bring this off the mat. For me, I like to imagine myself having an awareness switch. It's like right on the top of my head here. And I'm getting better at recognizing when that awareness switch is turned on and when that awareness switch is turned off. And when it's on, what's happening, the experience I have is that I'm aware of the beliefs, of the emotions, of the desires that are running. So I can witness them. So when I'm off the mat, I'm still in the human experience. I'm still allowing myself to feel all that arises. I'm not trying to bypass any of that, but the light is on, the awareness is there. And that's been profoundly helpful. And then in addition to that, I think what makes it really challenging being off the mat is that, as Bruce was saying yesterday, our early childhood, we have trauma. Whether it's what we often see as trauma, like obvious trauma, or it's subtle trauma. There's emotional imprints that we pick up, especially in those first 7 years of life, that typically happen in connection with people. And so when we're off the mat, we're typically in connection with people, and we're being reminded of those traumas. And how beautiful is it, though, that life is designed in this way, where we're on this path to come back to union, to come back into that authentic connection as one. And the way we do that is to come back in connection in the places where it often hurts the most, and move through it and heal through it. And so if our traumas happen in connection, our healing also happens in connection. And so I think it's actually off the mat that the deepest healing actually takes place. It's like the on the mat is actually preparing us, it's building the resilience. And when we're off the mat, in every single daily interaction, we're given this opportunity to meet what life has prepared for us, whatever that next edge is, to meet, and to stay with the awareness switch on, to stay courageous enough to explore what is that edge that you're facing in that connection. How is that reflection of one?
I want to spice things up a bit and add a
bit of chili,
some contrarian opinions. Okay, so the premise of this book is just that willpower doesn't work, right? Like we work out, we make this New Year's resolution to work out to lose weight, and then it doesn't happen, right? We want to change our lives, but it never happens because the premise that this guy says is that actually a lot of the motivational people, the inspirational people say you need to just put the energy into it, but what actually you need to do is to change your environment. right? So he says you have a seed of, I don't know, an oak tree, right? That seed won't grow in infertile soil, right? So in a sense, I feel like cultivate our peace, our presence. We have to be conscious and construct this ahead of time. Simultaneously, there's no doer. You are being done through. Things happen through you. And so if yoga is a practice, it's something you continuously do, right? The rose isn't trying to emit a beautiful fragrance. It's not trying to, it's what it is. So until we recognize deeply who we are at the core, at our essence, we will live our lives in this doership, this doing. And I think we'll continue to create suffering for ourselves and the world. It's so important to step back. There's a story of a monk, and he goes to his guru. The guru had his week of silence. And so the monk goes to him, and he asks him, he actually gets a piece of paper and he writes it down. He asks him, Guru, can you give me something, just something that I can take with me? Tell me what I can do so that I can live fully. And the guru, he takes the pen and he writes down one word. And he hands it to him. And the monk reads it and it says, awareness. And the monk is like, this is too brief. This is it. What is it? Give me more, please. Just give me more. So the guru, he takes the pen and he writes, awareness, awareness, awareness. And he gives it to him. And the monk is like, wait, okay, I get it, but what does it mean? The guru takes the pen and writes it. Awareness, awareness, awareness means awareness. To cultivate an awareness, a witness consciousness, is the highest attainment. To see thoughts as clouds passing in the sky, coming and going, and not getting caught in them. I truly believe this is the highest practice, and the only way for us to be successful when we are off the mat is to maintain a sense of awareness.
Thank you. Looking back, I can't remember most things, but I think I can remember some things. It was 50 years ago, and I was a body surfer on Maui, and I lived on a little beach, and I did whatever I wanted to do, whenever I wanted to do it. I rode those waves every day. I had no money. I had a toothbrush. That was fine. We found fruit. We lived there 4 years. And one day I was again body surfing with all my friends there. And I said, I think there must be something more to life than body surfing on Maui in the 60s. Duh. So that was a demarcation on my journey, you might say. So when I entered my first ashram in 1969 in Tucson, Arizona, I never looked back like I wish I had done this or I wish I had done that, because I had been a hippie in Haight-Ashbury and make not war. But I knew there was something else. And when I entered that ashram in Tucson, Arizona, we rose at 4 a.m. every morning, and that's what I've done for the last 50 years. Talk about a way to know who you are. We say to rise in the ambrosial hours of the morning, where it's so quiet. The birds aren't even chirping then. You get ahead of time and space. And to be awake with whatever you choose every day to become your awakeness, your awareness, your consciousness is up to you. But the time is of great importance. To be there when the sun comes up rather than the sun waking you up, you're there to meet it and say thank you. And from there, after some years, you're able to say, and for you, it'll be much quicker because we don't have as much time as we had. You do roll up your mat, and by the way, I lived many years with no mats because they didn't exist. But to roll up whatever you roll up, and to say thank you, and then to say, how may I serve today? What can I do? What can I do to help? And it's so easy if you get up ahead of time, because you had your whole world yourself. You own the whole world, and you felt so complete, and you filled up, and thereby you could give. And it didn't happen 50 years ago. I had so much anger. I had so much everything inside of me. I was really mean. I was real mean then. But then the whole rest of your life. You learn more in your mama's womb. You hear what she says. You feel the food she eats. You listen to her music. You listen to everything about her, and as your cells divide, you're becoming that. So we come with things to work out. But if you get up and walking in nature, if you get up, I tell you the truth, things will unravel. You'll be able to, what we call the neutral mind or the non-reactionary mind. You'll see it, but you won't have to join it because you had that step ahead of time and space. Last thing I want to leave you with is that Jesus, no, but that's not. I say, Father, forgive him, for he knows not what he did in consciousness. If he knew in consciousness, he would not have done that, but he hasn't been gifted yet with consciousness. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It keeps your heart open. Thank you.
Thank you, Gurmukh. I just wanted to ask you a quick question. You said, was that the ambrosial hours? That is such, I think just drop into that for a second. Ambrosial hours. Is that the hours before sunrise?
Well, yeah. It's like you got to lead on things in the winter because you can get up a little later. But summer you got to get up earlier. We get up 2.5 hours before the sun comes up. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I'll tell you, if you can just get out and get awake, to say thank you when the sun comes up, the whole life is understood so much better.
Thank you. There's another great quote from Jesus I like to reflect on many times is, "He who is without sin, throw the first stone." Right? So thank you for that. I love how you shared a little bit of your personal story. I'd like to take it a little bit deeper and get to know you all a bit more and hear about your personal stories, like what really ignited on your path and this energy, how are you bringing this energy of yoga, unity and peace into your lives?
Well, for me, the ignition, the catalyst was probably like most people here. It was a deep depression. Depression throws you into yourself if you are courageous enough to listen to it. So my career before I was doing what I'm doing now, I was a musician, I was a rapper. And, you know, real briefly, I was, you know, pretty successful. I was getting in magazines, I was working with Grammy Award winning artists, traveling, but I was deeply unhappy. And I was unhappy because, you know, even though I was successful, I wasn't fulfilled. And so it came to a point where I just, you know, I quit. Actually, I was reading a story from Gandhi. See, back in the day, Gandhi had organized and led a march in India. Hundreds of people came to, you know, set up this march with him. They took off work. They came to organize the whole thing. And after one day, the first day, Gandhi, he quit. He quit the march. And all of Gandhi's followers came up to him and they were like, Gandhi, how you just gonna quit? You call yourself a guru, a leader, you're a coward. How can you just quit after one day? And Gandhi said something I'll never forget. He said, my commitment is to truth, not to consistency. He said, my commitment is to truth, not to consistency. And when I read this story, I realized that I'm being consistent with something that's not true to who I was. So I quit completely. Chris, I quit completely. And, you know, I read everything. I read every psychotherapy book out there. I read every spiritual text, the Tao, the Gitas, everything. You know, Sufi mystic tradition, everything I could get my hands on. I meditated, and all of this was to find this thing, fulfillment. Like where is this thing? Where is happiness? Where is this thing called happiness? The commonality between everybody here is we all want to be happy. Where is this thing called happiness? Is it in the Ganga? Is it in the palace? Where is it? And so after introspection, I realized the happiness ain't out there. Happiness is inside here. It's the highest form of happiness is peace. And peace happens when you're not judging reality as good or bad. You fall in love with what is. And so having this rare and in here, this is when my career shifted to what I do now. And everything changed, right? Like my motivations back then were, how can I become the biggest rapper ever? How can I make a bunch of money, get this, get that? And when it shifted, my motivation became, how can I live the truest life I can live through service?
Thank you.
So, listening to my beautiful brother, Princier, it's so interesting because we have these basic tenets or truths. And of course, one of them, as I began today with, was about all of the different paths leading into the same truth. And yet, when we actually experience these tenets, even though you know they are true, nonetheless, there's always this very sweet kind of buzz of excitement, literally like an almost electrical kind of buzz of, oh, wait, yeah, that's the truth. And so when I listen to you share that, and I think about my own story and realize how the paths were so different, and yet, and, they brought us into exactly the same river. Without going into very many details of my story, I come from America. I was born and raised there. And at 25, after having graduated from Stanford and being in the midst of doing a PhD in psychology, I came to India with a backpack on a 1 semester off of a PhD program, knowing nothing about India, not even being interested in being here. I would love to say I was seeking or searching, but at that age, in the world that I grew up in, I didn't even know there was something to seek for. I didn't know there was another answer. I didn't know there was another level of existence. Happiness as given to us was this equation of get a good education, make a lot of money, look the right way in the right clothes, vacation in the right places, get invited to the right parties, etc., etc. And I wasn't, otherwise I definitely would have searched for it. But this is where I always emphasize the extraordinary grace of grace, because it's not about how much meditation you've done. It's not about how pure and divine and amazing you are. It's not about any of that. It's simply about how open you are. Because grace is there. And grace isn't checking things off a list of, yeah, she's done her meditation, she's done her japa, she has earnestly sought for God, she has given up this, given up that. None of it. Grace is just there. And so, fast forwarding a lot, cutting out a lot, I end up on the banks of Ganga here in Rishikesh. And 20 minutes after dropping off our bags in a hotel, had an experience standing on the banks of Ganga that was like a veil was pulled off of not just my eyes, but every way that I had of knowing, every way that I had of interacting with the universe, everything that I knew. And in that moment, I had an experience of truth, and the joy and the ecstasy and the bliss and all of that that comes with it. And I burst into tears, and that was it. I mean, I knew this is where I am meant to be. And there's a lot more beautiful elements as well. I won't share them all, share them here. But in terms of today, and in terms of the life and what that looks like, as he was speaking in conclusion, sir, that's not the end goal. It's not about, let me meditate, let me do yoga so that I can be enlightened, and then, well, if the rest of you are still living in your hell, so be it. I am in peace and enlightened. Your peace, your enlightenment, your awakening is such that we become clear vessels for the divine will to flow, for the flow of the divine to flow through us. And then, like the flower gives fragrance, like the apple tree gives apples, like the river is water, we serve. And for me, my life has been, for the last almost 24 years, service. But what's been really interesting about it is to keep any identity out of it, to have it literally be just in this moment, right here, right now, in this breath, how can I simply be an empty vessel, an empty vehicle for whatever the universe needs in this moment? And so it's not about, oh, well, I'm a spiritual teacher, and so you come to me and I'm going to give you a lecture, or I'm going to teach you how to meditate. If somebody walks in because they've traveled for days after seeing an advertisement of a medical camp, a free medical camp that we're running here, and they've brought their mother for a cataract operation, and they walk in, and at that moment, there's nobody sitting in our reception office, and so they end up in my office. It's not about, oh, friend who has traveled for 3 days without a meal or a shower, sit down, let me speak to you about the nature of yourself. It's about, get this guy a room, get him a shower, get him a hot meal. The exciting piece for me of the service is to keep me out of it, that this is what I simply be, to respond with love, with truth, with consciousness, with awareness, with openness, to whatever that moment requires. And that's been a really extraordinary aspect of the experience. I don't think of it as a journey. It's not one place to another place. It's an experience. But the very last piece I wanted just to mention actually was something you said in response to Chris's first question about the environment around us and carrying that mat with us, which of course is simple but not easy. And the way that I like to think about it, and the way that for me it has worked on a personal level as I move through the world, is how many people here have ever worn a wetsuit? Raise your hand if you've ever worn a wetsuit. Okay. So here's how a wetsuit works. It actually, and this is why it's called a wetsuit, not a dry suit, is you actually get wet. It doesn't keep the water from you. But what it does is it enables a tiny little bit of water in between you and the suit. Your body heat warms that little bit of water within the wetsuit, so that then when you go in the ocean, even if the ocean is cold, you are living in this experience of warmth. And we have that ability energetically, as Bruce shared yesterday, in terms of our thoughts literally manifesting outside of our skulls, outside of our physical bodies, into our energy field. And I like to think of it on a personal level in terms of a personal wetsuit. So, okay, I'm going out into the world today, going out onto that subway, going here, going there. Can you create, before you walk out that door, on a visual level, on an experiential, felt sense level, sort of that own wetsuit experience, that at least the energetic world around you is one of love, of union, of peace, of truth. And then, as you move into the world, as you get ready, as that courage, that open-hearted courage fills you, you find yourself super excited to unzip and open your wetsuit because you know you're now at a place where that energy can go out even more into the world. But that you actually have the ability, in times when it's difficult, in situations where it's difficult, to create the environment in which you live by your own energy that isn't necessarily that which is going to be impacted by that ocean around you. So that's a visual practice that I use, and thought about it when you were sharing about carrying the mat with you. I think of it as my own energetic wetsuit.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So I grew up in Calgary, Canada, in the Rocky Mountains, freezing half of my life. And when I was in school, it was so clear that my drive was to be successful. And my parents are both authors and speakers in that case, and third speaker myself, funny enough, and was buying real estate and was just doing whatever I could to somehow prove my value. I'm sure all of you have had that phase of your life. The phase of life by me, the ambition. And as the story often goes, the day comes and you get that tap on the shoulder, or that book shows up, or the teacher shows up, and you're brought into a deeper level of truth. And for me, that happened, as it usually does, in a pretty auspicious way. And I found myself booking a one-way ticket to Costa Rica, partially as a reward to warm up, but also from just being willing for the first time in my life to just not know and to follow this undeniable call to just stop everything I was doing. I was seeing just the madness of this energy to be somebody. And the only sane thing seemed to be just to get away from it all, get out of the ecosystem, which perhaps is what some of you are doing here this week, is just getting out of the insanity. And sitting in Costa Rica, I started to tune much more into the cries of the world. And this was 2007, going into 2008 when the financial crisis hit. And it became so clear that this generation, I'm kind of right at the start of the millennial generation, that our generation was going to see a massive shift. And I started studying history and realizing that, sure enough, you know, there's been these 5 epochs of civilization, these eras where the world eventually went through a fundamental shift into a new epoch. And all signs pointed to that was what was on deck for our generation. And I sat with that and felt the beauty of it, and also felt the responsibility of it. And that what was mine to do was the question I was sitting with, was how can I give my life, give my gifts to serve this amazing transition the world is going through? And I hadn't really had a proper teacher at that time. I had started yoga in a light way. And so I was using a lot of my programming. I was using a lot of the same raw materials. And so I started to think, who are the people, who are the game changers of our time? Who are the people? It's going to be a rather small group, like it usually is every time there's a major phase shift in history. Who are those people that are going to support the transition? And I wanted to find them. I wanted to be a part of that. It felt like a meaningful thing to be engaged in. And I really didn't know any of these people. And so I started to look at companies that were conscious, as a way to find those leaders, the people that were not only awake, but were able to build things, that had the resources, had the influence. And it was easier to find the conscious companies than just to find those conscious leaders. And that ended up becoming a whole other thing, building a ranking of the world's top conscious businesses, purpose-driven companies. But in the process, I built this network of people, and I started to bring them together. I started looking for those rare geniuses that were in their heart, that they were here to serve, but they were just brilliant. They're keeping people together, and we started all sorts of ambitious projects that are going to change the world, and we were steeping in all the things that needed to be done, all the doing. And then being part of a lot of those projects, I watched as they decohered one after the next, after the next. Some of the most incredible human beings just not able to stay in connection with each other. The ego, the ambition, the different agendas, the different strategies getting in the way from just being present. And that was a real moment of despair for me. It was probably kind of the fourth project in that had a lot of hope and merit, and feeling, gosh, like if we're not the ones to do this, then who is? And so this phase up into this moment I would frame as the life by me. And then life graced me with a meeting of this beautiful man, Bharat Mitra, who saw me in this struggle and with unreasonable patience supported the unwinding of that doer, of the one that wanted to do it. And that started the phase of life through me, of letting go, learning to surrender more deeply, finding the humans that were not just brilliant, not just driven to do, but were recognizing that it was first about who do we need to be. And this thing that you guys have heard called Uplift has been a container where we've got to gather those people, some of the most incredible people on the planet in different sectors, but are in this recognition of first, who do we need to be? And how do we stay so present together that we allow the doing to arise through us, not by us? That we can be courageous enough to sit in that place of a knowing and be animated into the action. Sit in the unrest, sit in the tragedy that we feel in these moments of human history, but trust that there's something far greater than us orchestrating all of this, that's moving through us, that's wanting to actually move us. And to allow ourselves to be the instruments that are played. And so my life now is one of an assembling orchestra supported by all these beautiful beings you see on stage. And this inquiry of how do we become a new sound together? How do we become the instruments that we're meant to be played as the beautiful instruments we are, and as Bruce showed yesterday with the metronome, to do that in harmony.
The truth is that I sit here and I don't have a story. There is a beautiful story about an Indian sage woman that was living in a village, and she was a little bit mad, and everybody knew she was a little bit mad, but she was also beautiful. One day when everybody come from the fields, they see her in the center of town was a small village, and in the center there was only one light bulb in the whole village. And they see her looking. One man said, "What are you looking?" He said, "The key for my house, I lost it." So everybody starts helping her to find the key. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, they don't find the key. Finally, somebody asked her, "Where did you lose it?" She said, "Next to the river." They said, "But why we're looking here?" She said, "Well, this is the only place we have light." And they said, "You about fulfillment, about peace, about happiness, where are you looking?" It's often that we're looking for peace within the human experience. And the human experience is an invitation to recognize that which is prior and beyond. The consciousness that we are is not limited to the human experience. And when we limit ourselves to the human experience, often in the name of spiritual practice, looking to improve, to feel better, to work out through whatever it is that we need to, as if by doing something now, sometimes in the future, if practice is not a celebration, any spiritual practice, whatever it may be, if it's not a celebration, a natural expression, an extension of who we are, it might be a trap. Inquire within yourself if we are not once again caught up in some delusion, as if there is something that we need to do in order to get something in another time than right now. And as we are willing to see the arrogance of ego, which is always about doing, and give ourselves a moment to stop. There was a beautiful Buddhist monk that came to have a conversation with my guru, Papaji. And he said, "Papaji, all you tell people is keep quiet. But you must recognize that the practice, the principle of Buddhism, compassion, right livelihood, non-violence, it's very valid practices. Don't you recommend people who come to see you to embrace those principles?" And Papaji looked at him and he said, "Find out who you are. All those principles, they emerge naturally. It's not a doing. It's the most effortless expressions of who we are." Let's have this week to be courageous, to penetrate through all delusions of doing, through all the different traps, whatever they may be. And ultimately, how to take yoga out of the mat how can... It's not what we do. Yoga is who we are. And each one is a unique expression. In each one, it will manifest in different ways. And the simplicity of recognizing it in all expressions, and the natural respect of that divine light that you cannot not see in each one that you will ever meet. By a calling from within, keep quiet. Give yourself the gift. It's a perfect, perfect, perfect environment. And when you do, it doesn't go anywhere, can't go anywhere. Jai Gurudev.
Finish?
Yeah, but I was thinking if Gurmukh wanted to share either on this or on something, and then we conclude, because we're not going to have time for
Gurmukh, would you like to share some words?
One of the 5 sutras that I try to live is recognize the other person as you.
What'd you say?
recognize the other person as you.
Recognize the other person as you. Recognize the other person is you. Beautiful. That reminds me of the Mayan saying, I am another yourself. So I just wanted to, one thing that Richard said, Princey A, was create an environment that cultivates peace and unity. So I wanted to invite you all again. You know, one of our great missions is to really, how do we create this environment as a global movement, as a global space, almost like this vibe of the ashram can go global. And of course, we're living in an internet age, we're fully connected, and so we invite you all again to please come to uplift.love. And Global Day again. Oh, 1 second.
I see that my brother Richard want to say something, and because one of the things that have been published, that there will be questions and answers. I've been what appeared to be a very successful entrepreneur and in business and running companies and projects and whatnot. And I just want to say that while there wasn't enough time now, I'm absolutely available for each and every one that wish to interact. I'm here for the whole week. I'm around, I'm available. Any one of you that have any questions or experience to share, it will be my joy to meet you with open arms and open heart.
Yeah, just for the time remaining, I just wanted to say that it's so easy for the mind to divide things. We've divided ourselves into nations and races. All of these are artificial. This is the nature of existence itself. It's you. And you don't need to do anything. It's your birthright. We tend to think spirituality is you got a long beard or you need to dress a certain way or go. It is. It's beyond words, and it's you. It's your natural essence. Before a thought. It's a great book I read years ago. You don't even need to read the book, just listen to the title. The title is What's Wrong with Right Now If You Don't Think About It? You realize that nothing. Right and wrong appear in the mind, in a judgmental view of reality. But when you can come back to source, to presence, to peace and love itself, beyond the words. You're home. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Princey A. We're going to end. Vandana Shiva was supposed to be at the Yoga Fest but couldn't make it. So we have a special, she made a special video for all of us, which we're going to share now. Sadhviji.
And in the meantime that they get the video up, a quick and important announcement, which is that we've had a very, very beautiful addition to our program, which is that today from 2 o'clock to 2:30, right here, we will have Sri Sri Shankan is arriving shortly and then has to run to catch a flight. So from exactly 2 o'clock to 2:30, he will be here. So we're going to ask everyone to have lunch calmly and in a beautiful, conducive to digestion sort of way, but also not to linger on 1:45, and that you can all be back in here before that so that we don't unnecessarily lose time.
Okay, I think we're ready for the video. Thank you.
I'm very sorry I am unable to join you personally at the International Yoga Festival. Message from our beautiful